If the world were a fair place, we'd be talking about Rita Hayworth all day, every day. Margarita Cancino seemed to have it all as a film actress, including the ability to look good smoking a cigarette. Those are a staple of the film noir genre. And what goes great with a quality butt? Well, they say a terrific cup of coffee does. I've never even tried smoking though, so I have no experience with that. But what I do have experience with is promoting a brand of Java that goes great with just about everything. And that is Sparkplug Coffee. Sparkplug has the freshest, fairly traded, premium Arabica beans in Canada. They deliver to customers in my country up here north of the border, but also to Americans, and that'll happen within a week. For those of us who are north of the border, the shipping is free. Sparkplug's got many blends and roasts, including rotating seasonal blends. Although if you prefer half-calf or decaf, you can nab some of that just as easily as you can the buzzy stuff. We suggest you buzzy stuff. Who calls it that? I did just now. We suggest you sign up for a membership, though, because one of those will get you perks and deals that some Joe Schmo non-member won't get. And you, unlike Mr. Schmo, will save money on every order. You can even customize your membership to get orders when it suits you, which is a very big reason you can't call this a run-of-the-mill Coffee of the Month Club. Sparkplug.coffee/HYES are the letters you need to type to find their website and to save 20% off your next order. Our HYES promo code is the key to saving a little bit of money. Okay, I assume you didn't concoct a plan to fake your death during the past minute or so, nor did you persecute the woman you lust over for what you think is disloyalty to your employer. If you did do those things, well, aim higher. And pay attention, I'm talking here! But you probably didn't, so let's band together and tell the conductor to play his tunes, and then I can get this show on the road. And actione! Have you ever seen Gilda? Hey, one and all, and thank you so much for being part of the audience for the 546th episode of the Classic Movies podcast known as Have You Ever Seen? We dig into the guts of motion pictures of all shapes and sizes, and we spoil them every Monday. And what do you know, every other Friday, this, breaking news, it's a Friday. On those Mondays, my wife Bev is usually across the table from me, but since it's the end of the week, Ryan Ellis here will be in monologue mode today. And when I ramble on in this room alone, I piece my way through the plot sequentially, I engage in 2 or even 22 bits of tomfoolery, and I throw in enough asides that this really could be called Have You Ever Tangented? I also do impressions of famous people on occasion, you dirty stinking coppas! Although this movie has very few coppas in it. I guess one. But before we do in fact start going through this story, I need to set it up by establishing the bona fides. So Gilda was released by Columbia Pictures on April 25th, 1946. And it did well. It was certainly beloved in fictional prisons and Frank Darabont movies. Some guys in that fictional prison liked it so much they saw it many times. And they love when she does that shit with her hair. And who can blame them? It's good shit. Great shit. Oh my God, it's never great shit. I think all those guys came during that scene in that movie when they all go nuts. 90% of critics on Rotten Tomatoes give this film their approval. There are 70 reviews on the site, and the average is 8 out of 10. 88% of audiences have smiled at Gilda, too. The numbers tells me that the film was 9th that year at the U.S. box office. Notorious. I think you're contractually obliged to say that every time you say the movie Notorious. Anyway, Notorious was number 2. Notorious. That's a Hitchcock classic we reviewed many years ago. It may come up again before this review is over. It will. You know what number 1 was? The film that Disney wants to pretend they never made. Song of the South. And it was top dog by a lot. The number says it made over $49 million, while the also successful Notorious made about $40 million less. So that was a monster. But we didn't make it. Oh my God, it's racist. We didn't make it. We're good. Disney's good. Revisionist history. Gilda was only up for 1 award, according to the IMDb anyway. It was a nominee for the grand prize at the 1946 Cannes Film Festival. The Academy, so Oscars here, didn't nominate Gilda for awards in any category. The script was probably worthy of an Oscar nomination, particularly for the dialogue. There are story problems we'll get into, but the dialogue's great. And Rudolph Mattei's black and white cinematography deserved a place at the show too, at least a nomination. Hell, Rita Hayworth probably should have been sitting in the audience as a Best Actress nominee, but nope. Gilda was made part of Congress's National Film Registry in 2013, along with Mary Poppins, Pulp Fiction, The Quiet Man, Roger and Me, and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Those other 5 classics can be found somewhere on this channel. Put the Blame on Maine. Put the blame on Maine. Ranked 84th on the American Film Institute's Top 100 Songs. Hey, there's no edits. I got through that. American Film Institute. Pretty deserving choice, I'd say. It probably should have ranked higher than 84th, actually. Gilda was also nominated for AFI's Top 100 Passions and the Top 100 Quotes, with Gilda saying, "If I'd been a ranch, they would have named me the Bar Nothing." That's a snappy line, but shit, man, I have to confess I do not remember hearing that sentence. And I can't go to the AFI website for the nominees of lists, just the ones that made the lists, and I didn't write down the quotes many years ago in my own files, so I assume the website I looked up to find out what the quote is correct. So I guess I just dropped the sexy ball on this one. That sexy ball of Bar Nothing. Pretty good double entendre. Anyway, the last AFI thing is that the film was also up for both the 1998 and 2007 Top 100 lists. Later on in the podcast, I'll talk about the main reason I chose to cover this flick, and it's AFI related, but we'll get to that a little later on. Okay, that's the setup. Here's the story. Rita Hayworth is the headliner in this one, of course, but the first actor we see after the opening credits is Glenn Ford. Ford is actually the main character in this, but the movie does belong to Hayworth, plus she was simply a bigger star than he was, so she got top billing. Anyway, he's playing Johnny Farrell, who's rolling dice in an alley and winning some money, partly because he's cheating. He, by the way, will look pretty snazzy through most of this film, although not yet. Maybe part of the problem is he's not home in America. He's in Buenos Aires. The whole movie is set in South America, which is not the most common location for a noir. Curiously, nobody speaks any of the languages, though, like Spanish for one, and mostly all we see are white people down there. George McCready is, I think it's McCready, not McCready, anyway, is Balin Munson, a posh man who saves Johnny from a stick-up and suggests the dice roller get off the street and try his luck at a casino. That's where he can make real money. Only don't try any funny stuff or you'll pay for it. Hard. He didn't say hard like that, I just said that. Yeah, coppers. There's no coppers. Nobody ever just scolds somebody with a harsh reprimand in a noir film. Ugly threats are always implied, even when someone's trying to help you. John O'Vision does clean up pretty nicely, and he looks fairly sharp when he walks onto that casino floor. But Johnny's got a Johnny, and he doesn't listen to Balin. He just goes ahead and cheats. For some reason, they let players touch the cards at the blackjack table, and the Johnner keeps demanding to exercise his right to cut the deck. And what do you know? He keeps getting blackjack, or 21, I guess they call it in this movie. I don't know if it's ever been a different game. I think it's always been the same game, blackjack, 21. It doesn't seem to take long before he's built up a couple of high stacks of chips. High society. Although casinos not only don't like to lose, they aren't going to lose. So the card sharp gets called on the carpet by the well-dressed thugs working security. Johnny gets knocked on his ass, then looks up to see the owner of the joint is in fact Balin Munson. Dun 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 dun. Not really a dun 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 moment, actually. And getting back to that cutting the deck thing, I can believe they would get you to do that, but to be allowed to pick up the whole deck and handle it? Nope, I don't really buy any of that. A simple cut, okay, sure. Then again, even that. Chris and I talked on some of our Scoring at the Movies podcasts that a player would never be allowed to touch the cards at a casino at all. When big money's at stake, they're not going to give you the chance to cheat. And even if you are allowed to tell the dealer you want to cut, you can't shuffle the fucking cards. Maybe you could back in 1946, I don't know, it seems absurd to me. Anyway, Munson tells Farrell to take a big fat hike, since nobody wins that much money at 21 without doing it dirty. But then Johnny read the Gilda script, and he knows he needs to stick around, so he talks his way into being hired. It's the Frank Abagnale Jr. approach. Since Tom Hanks and his law buddies couldn't ever seem to get their hands on Leo and Catch Me If You Can, they just put him on the payroll working for the good guys once they do finally arrest the con man. They couldn't really beat him, so they let him join them. Or made him join them. One of those. Made him. We get a little bit of Johnny doing a voiceover narration from time to time in this picture, and he tells us here that he was made the casino manager fairly quickly. He even gets to be the man in charge when Balin announces that he's going abroad for a while. When the big boss returns, we find out that he's impulsively married, you'll never guess, some lady named Gilda. Balin is a very flawed guy and does some shit-ass things in this flick, but he has great taste. He loves that red hair. My eyeballs, your eyeballs, everybody's eyeballs got to enjoy a feast whenever Hayworth was on screen. I don't often find the old-timey actresses to be nearly as pretty or sexy as the Margot Robbies, Rosario Dawsons, or Florence Pughs of today, but Gene Tierney, and especially Rita Hayworth, were. When Johnny and Gilda first lay eyes on each other, it's lust at first sight. Well, that and they knew each other from before, even though they don't tell Balin that. But yeah, the scene in this movie they show in Shawshank that Morgan Freeman likes so much, well, they all like so much, when she responds to the question, "Are you decent?" with "me?" while doing that shit with a heya, well, that happens here. And you can see why those Shaw cons hooted and hollered when she does that. I almost did, sitting at home with Bev. She watched this with me, by the way. Not only is she hot as hell tossing her hair back like that, Bev and Rita Hayworth, but the subtext of asking me when asked if she's decent suggests, no, of course not. I might be clothed, but I'm not decent. So again, good dialogue in this movie, if not always the great story. The greatest story. And Hayworth even looks sexy while she's smoking. Of course, even though I don't dig on cigs, I can't deny that it looks cool when people do it in movies, especially when they do it like this. Balin confesses he married Gilda only after knowing her for one day. Now that's a staple of movies made back in the Code era of Hollywood films. He wanted to sleep with her, but first he had to marry her. And why wait even a week to do either of those things when you know what you want? I wonder if Scorsese was influenced by this movie when he made Casino in 1995, because at least some of the time De Niro feels like Munson and Sharon Stone is reminiscent of Gilda. Anyway, John and Gil are antagonistic with each other. Gil. Which irritates Balin because, well, hey, she is his wife. Show some respect, employee. Balin is called away from the table while the two of them are having drinks, which allows Johnny and Gilda to talk turkey. He accuses her of marrying the boss only for his money, but she fires back with, "Is the pot calling the kettle black?" Now, Johnny isn't sleeping with the boss to earn his paycheck, that we know of, but I see her point. Would he give any shit about Balin and watching his back if he wasn't being paid to do it? Well, he might, because he seems like he gets along well with the head man, but he's still more of an employee than a friend. And there's also an angle on this I'll get to later about another reason why he may be looking out for Balin, or even jealous. A different kind of jealousy than you think. Johnny tries to stop her from dancing with a Latin Lothario type, but she just goes ahead and does it anyway. I love Johnny's line after Balin comes back to the table and demands that Johnny cut in and bring her back. Johnny walks up and interrupts the two-stepping by saying, "Your husband is showing." Another good line. The story's overstuffed, but the dialogue is often outstanding, and it was right there. Later that night, Balin confronts Gilda and says he knows she does in fact know Johnny from before, which she still denies, although she doesn't have a problem saying she hates the man, and Balin fires back that Farrell hates her too. Which brings me to my movie in a nutshell. So, Gilda, in a nutshell. Americans in Argentina openly agitate each other. Can you feel the love tonight and the hate? They're never going to solve this problem in this movie, are they? And finally get along. Never. Another day goes by and Gilda makes nice with a random guy after she accidentally hits him with her cigarette when she tosses it away. They both have fuck-me eyes. Screwing around in secret is one thing. Flaunting it in your husband's workplace is something else. Balin isn't around, so Johnny tries to stop her from dancing with his boy, Gabe Evans. But as always, Gilda goes her own way. She leaves with Gabe, which is probably for the best, because an employee who got fired tries to shoot Balin while the boss is sitting in his favorite booth. I thought it would have been a good touch if the bullet that misses Balin was to his left, suggesting that if Gilda had been there with the guys, she would have been hit by the shot. It's on the boss's right, though. I feel like Charles Vidor, and he directed this, I don't think I said that yet, did I? So he directed Gilda. Vidor missed an opportunity as the director to do something subtle here, that Gilda would be dead if she was by her husband's side the way he wants her to be. But you can't always get what you want. If you try sometimes, you just might find, you get what you need. Anyway, the would-be assassin fails, so he slinks off to a room, closes the door, and proceeds to blow his own head off. Because Balin realizes he could have been taken out by that homicidal, suicidal nitwit, he decides to tell Johnny the combination to the safe, and also let him in on what kind of non-casino dealings he's involved in. Apparently tungsten is big business down in Argentina, and this is just after the war, so I guess it's supposed to be 46, contemporary 46, I guess. Tungsten, though. Munson has been the front for some German gangsters, and now that WW2 is over, they want him to sign the business over to them. But he doesn't want to. He's just crazy about tungsten. And money. Over drinks, Balin says flat out to Johnny that he bought Gilda, just as he bought Farrell. But he's mad about her, and who can blame him? The movie was 40 or 45 minutes in at this point, and I'd had horny thoughts about Rita Hayworth 10 or 12 times already. It's not just because of her looks either. She's smart and sassy too. But I wonder what the character would do if she overheard her husband say she was bought and paid for. That might hurt the marriage a little bit. It's already a bit of a sham marriage as it is. Johnny punches out, I guess, Gabe, but maybe it's just a guy who looks like him. Then he tells Gilda he's going to be right on her ass from now on. She can live her life, but he's always going to drop her off and pick her up. Dude, she can still fuck many men's brains out while you're waiting around for her to call you. You're not going to be in the rooms with her. Anyway, there's no time to hash that out because Rita Hayworth is singing that AFI beloved song, Put the Blame on Maine. Gee, she can sing and play guitar too. I bet she thinks Ziggy's gotten too preachy too. Although I read that they dubbed her singing. If they did, it isn't obvious the way Britt Eklund was dubbed in The Wicker Man, which we covered, when was that, about a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago? So maybe that's bullshit, but I read that she was dubbed. The washroom attendant, Uncle Pio, is the only audience she's aware she has while blaming Maine. JF up there, Johnny, is watching her from upstairs without her even knowing it. Stephen Garay plays Pio, by the way, who's going to become pretty key later in the story. The reason Johnny even witnesses this performance at all is because he was sleeping in the casino office in his jammies. And I figured this was coming, but now we know there was love between these two. They make it perfectly clear in this scene. This flick is another in a long line of them where I can say that I've seen it before, but I felt like new because it's been so long since I first peeped it out. That's why I didn't remember any of the big plot turns. If only I could feel that way about Jaws again, or Psycho, or some of these great scary movies, twist movies, what have you. All the great twist movies, not know what's going to happen, but Those I remember very well. Gilda says she shouldn't have married a man when she was on the rebound, rebounding from Johnny Farrell, in fact, although she still says she hates him, and this time you can't say it's her putting on a show for her husband, because he's not even there. If these two did have this kind of heat between them back then, whenever that was, it must have been porn-level sex. The scene ends when Johnny throws off another snappy line and goes to leave, but Gilda throws a guitar his way, missing the man, but smashing I've got mirror here, but wasn't it a window? Glass window? Glass door or something like that? Maybe a glass door. And what does Mr. Farrell do when he comes back in the room to see the damage? He smiles. Maybe things are eventually going to be all right. He respects her throwing ability. Meanwhile, Uncle Pio gets slightly out of line with Johnny, who tells the bathroom jockey that he's fired for that. But Pio knows his job is safe because washroom attendants hear all the gossip. Uncle is not above blackmail. The Germans, Smithers. So the Germans interrupt the argument and demand to see Balin, but Johnny tells them no at first and says they need to get lost. But they aren't going anywhere because Tungsten Baby is where it's at. In fact, one of them pulls a gun on Johnny. Over tungsten? Well, Glenn Ford isn't admits about money. You knew that. But as for that gun, well, Glenn Ford is an American. He should feel right at home around guns. Although for a 40s noir, this movie has very few guns in it, and very few kappas. Balin prepares a gun with a switchblade bayonet before he'll ever agree to meet with the Germans. Wait, was that a gun or something else? Anyway, Johnny and Gilda dance very close at the masquerade ball in the casino. I don't think that's a candy bar in his pocket. She says something to piss him off again, and he shoves her away. We had met Detective Maurice Obregon, so the capper here. That was earlier, and I didn't mention it, but he's back to get on Johnny's case now. The guy is played by Joseph, is it Calleia? I should look this up. Calleia. Calleia, I guess. And he was given the task by the Argentinian police to keep an eye on the Germans. It seems the authorities down there have good reason to worry about their precious, precious tungsten. This stuff is like Taylor Swift concert tickets. Balin shoots one of the germs from... germs? I guess I left out the A-N. It's funny to call them germs at this point because a lot of them still were germs. He shoots one of them from up in his office while the guy is down in the midst of that party. At least I think that's what happened. I know I don't always get details right in these solo shows because I don't have Bev to play off of to confirm if I've misread any story beats. But I felt like this scene wasn't directed very clearly. You get the shutters opening up and then closing, and Johnny sees that, so obviously Balin did something, and I obviously shot the guy, I guess. But it isn't made 100% clear. Now, people wouldn't have heard the shot from up there rather than right in front of them. Charles Vidor was mostly doing a great job in this movie, so I was surprised that this scene would feel so foggy. It's an important one because it's the rare bit of violence and murder that we'll see in the whole thing. And the guy who owns this casino shoots into a crowd? He could easily have killed the wrong person. And he's not a sociopath who doesn't care who he hits and who he hurts. Of course, the logic could be by the writers that if he killed the guy while they're all up in the office, that would be hard to cover up. I guess there's plausible deniability when it happens amongst a lot of people on the dance floor. Johnny drives Gilda home. She seems to be hinting that he go up sometime and see her. Balin isn't there and everyone else is celebrating Carnival. Carnival? I think they just call it Carnival in this. I always thought it was Carnival. So there could be no time like the present. But Farrell continues this loyalty kick, and he also, horny for her or not, doesn't seem to really like Gilda all that much. After they talk yet again about how much they hate each other, hate, they finally succumb to primal need and start sucking face. But before the two of them could continue turning me on, Balin comes home only to quickly leave again. A guilty Johnny follows his boss, and Obregon follows the follower. Balin takes off in a small airplane, which crashes into the ocean almost immediately. In a Krusty the Clown plot, though, Balin is faking his death by crashing the plane like this. Like Krusty did, or like Batman must have done in The Dark Knight Rises. He parachuted to safety without being noticed. Johnny thinks the big man is in fact dead, so he tries to take care of Balin's business. He's got the combination to the safe, including dealing even more now with Gilda, and trying to figure out the tungsten gambit. Now, if her husband is supposed to be dead, wouldn't Johnny and Gilda have fucked as gloriously as anyone ever did as soon as possible? There's no way she would actually mourn this man for very long. Johnny might, but not her. Of course, we're about to find out why there's been no consummation of this impending union. They do get married, right as I was in the middle of typing up this fantasy scenario of the two of them ending up in bed. It's cold to rush into something as serious as marrying another guy when your husband was just recently reported dead, but it's the 40s, so they can't do it until they've got that piece of paper. Only in movies, though. I'm sure in reality people did whatever they wanted like they do now. But oh, it's twist time. What a twist. Because Johnny only married her to punish her. That's why Bev married me. I respect her decisions. If she's listening to this, I hope she laughed at that. As John says, she hadn't been faithful to Balin when he was alive, but she was going to be faithful to him now that he was dead. In a Mr. Burnsian touch, there's a huge painting of Balin hanging on the wall of their place. His face doesn't literally say, literally, don't forget, you're here forever. But it might as well. And one of the thugs is given the task of following Gilda, always, Rice, meat white. Sounds like fun. A frustrated Gilda goes over to see Johnny, I guess at the casino? I forget now. Have I raved yet about, maybe I did at least once, how perfect her hair is? I suppose Hayworth had great hair to begin with, but it's always flowing and just flawless in every frame of this film. The hairdresser must have spent every waking moment with Rita, keeping that blow dryer handy, or maybe just naturally she had incredibly perfect hair. But then nobody could possibly have naturally gray hair like this that always looks this flawless. It's funny how Hayworth plays Gilda at this point in the film, now that she has the man she's wanted all along. She's nicer and even seems humbled, although that was before she found out what Johnny was really up to. She tells him that there was never anybody for her other than him, and she did all that gallivanting just to make him jealous. He doesn't care, though, and he doesn't budge, so she decides to go back to romancing any man she can find. Only this time, Johnny's goons keep interfering. So she runs away to Uruguay and tries to get a divorce there. So that's where you gotta go. I'll let Bev know when the time comes. No matter what Gilda ever did to Balin or to him, it's interesting that the screenplay is making Johnny be this cruel. The Munson marriage was his business because he was watching Balin's back and was Balin's basically friend. But there is a limit to how much his business it was. Loyalty's great, but it wasn't his marriage. Isn't there something touching, even in a twisted way, to hear a woman you do have heat with and you're currently married to say that she was playing around with men just to get under your skin? It's a strange way to compliment someone, but it is a compliment. Uruguay doesn't work out too well either, because a man the Gilster starts to trust while she's in Montevideo ends up betraying her too. He's on John's payroll. Johnny shows up and takes a realistic-looking series of slaps in the face from Gilda when she realizes she can't escape this nightmare, but he just continues to be cold and mean to his wife. I read that Hayworth's slaps did some damage to Ford's teeth for real. She knocked a few of them out or something? They didn't seem that hard, but okay. Glenn was a pro, though, so he finished the take, and then he cried. Or something. You can't see evidence in at least this take that she loosened his bicuspids. Anyway, Gilda is not going to be able to get an annulment after all, and apparently she can't do that back in Argentina either. All these rules you gotta follow. Although, isn't it Reno, Nevada, in the States at this point? You went to get either divorce or annulments really quick and easy. Also a casino state, and certainly casino city. But we're back at this casino. Gilda puts a sexy smile on her face and sings "Put the Blame on Maine" for a packed house. I've disputed the selection of plenty of songs on the AFI's Top 100 Songs list. I'm not disputing this one. What a performance. This is up there with Marilyn Monroe's "I Wanna Be Loved by You" and "Some Like It Hot." And I think this is even sexier than that. And for what it's worth, this happened first, 13 years earlier than Marilyn's cleavage was about as exposed as it could be and not get the entire thing censored. And Gilda's song gets a standing ovation, as it should. She implies she's about to let men strip her clothes off right there on the stage just to embarrass Johnny, to show all these people the kind of woman he married. But hired goon Casey, he's been in this movie the whole time. Who's Casey again? Joe Sawyer. He interrupts and puts a stop to that noise. Meanwhile, Obregon sits down with a distraught Johnny and tells Balin's heir apparent that he's not going to be able to think clearly as long as he's this in love with Gilda. And he's also under arrest for dirty dealings, I guess? I was taking a note and missed the reason why. Feel free to yell at your phone about my shortcomings here. I've done it with a lot of people on their podcasts. At least I admit mine. In the next scene, Obregon says to him that Gilda never cheated on Balin. I don't know how he knows this or has proof of it. Even if he followed her around all the time, he wasn't in rooms with her. Again, I'm going to visualize being in a room with her and these guys. Well, then again, I guess the movie's saying that she wasn't doing anything with them. Well, anyway, Johnny finally softens after this advice from Obregon and says he wants to say goodbye to Gilda, who's going home to America, but also, please take me with you. Isn't he under arrest, though? And if he wants her back, then why say goodbye at all? Dialogue great, story not always so great. But Balin finally makes his triumphant return. He wants his wife back. Oh, and he confesses that he saw them kissing in the bedroom that night in his house, so now he's going to kill them both. So I guess he wants her back for a second, 2 seconds. But before he can, Uncle Pio grabs that weird stabby weapon and sticks it in Balin's back. Why did you lay it on the bar, you knucklehead? Anyway, Obregon happens by and tells the three of them that no one can be charged with Balin's murder, since he was already declared dead. So, yay! The lovers get to love each other after all, and Uncle Pio is not going to be charged with murder. Isn't that the double jeopardy thing, that movie, Tommy Lee Jones and Ashley Judd? You can't kill a guy twice, so you can't be charged with it twice. Not the same, I guess, but same basic idea. He's supposed to be dead. But a happy ending in a noir film? What are you doing, Charles Vidor? You don't end a noir with smiles? I'm not even sure I was rooting for this relationship anyway. It's a little like Notorious, which came out about 4 months later. Cary Grant is so rough on Ingrid Bergman that it's hard to want them to end up together. Although I guess in that one you do. That's such a great screenplay and even better actors. Still, these two storylines of he's a bastard and she's a victim didn't ruin either movie. Notorious is a classic and Gilda is awfully good too. So the cast. A Rita Hayworth movie had never been discussed on this channel before today, which is a big reason why this was on my radar at all. The AFI had her 19th on the ladies' side of the top 50 greatest stars, and, well, I realized about a year ago that we should make a point of covering some more of such people. All 25 of the guys have been talked about in this channel at some point. Actually, it's more than 25 because the Marx Brothers are in there as one entry. And I like them, but that's absurd. But there are still a few more women that we haven't discussed, like Mary Pickford and Shirley Temple. Carol Lombard and Mae West movies were reviewed for the first time in the past year for that reason, too. My Man Godfrey was quite a treat, by the way. I recommend that. We saw that about a year ago. She Done Him Wrong. That wasn't. I reviewed that back in, I think, January. I would love to get an Ava Gardner movie on this channel, too, because I remember liking her when I saw her, but most of them don't say, love me. Maybe On the Beach. That was pretty good. Anyway, we're getting through a lot of the supposedly greatest actresses of all time list the last year or so. I was very glad to spend the time watching and now reviewing this film because I forgot just how great a star Hayworth was. But go look at the AFI's top 100 stars list. Now, of course, that's 50 actors and then 50 modern actors, or at least living actors. Talk about the other 50. That's dumb. Make it be 100 people, for crying out loud. And tell me if their criteria isn't the dumbest. You had to start acting by or before 1950, or you had to be dead. So if The Men had been released in 1951 rather than 1950, Marlon fucking Brando wouldn't have made their list. But as for the actresses, be honest. Do you think even half the women on that list top the women of the modern era? And forget some of my faves like Winslet and Blanchett, neither of whom had been acting long enough to qualify as two of the greatest when the AFI released that list over 20 years ago. Granted, so let's exclude them. But their stupid rules omitted Meryl Streep and Jane Fonda and Susan Sarandon and shit, even Julia Roberts. Shirley Temple is on there for star power and box office success as much as she was for talent or range. So why not Julia for the same reason? But they had to have their dumb criteria. I've said it many times. That's the dumbest list they ever did. You know, here I am honoring it by covering a Rita Hayworth movie. But then again, twist my arm to have watched this movie, which I did like, and Rita Hayworth. But as for Hayworth, apart from her name being in the title of the Stephen King short story that the Shawshank Redemption was based on, this is probably the only time she'll be discussed on this channel. I looked at her filmography and not much screams out, review me. Oh wait, how could I almost forget that David Lynch had a glossy picture of Rita in Mulholland Drive, in the bathroom where Laura Herring comes up with her fake name. The woman doesn't remember who she is, then sees a poster on the wall from this movie and tells Naomi Watts, I'm Rita. Margarita Cancino was married 5 times, including to Orson Welles, with whom she had a daughter, but the lady didn't even live to see 70 when she died of Alzheimer's. I said her filmography wasn't remarkable. Well, she was in stuff like Only Angels Have Wings, CoverGirl, the Orson Welles picture, The Lady from Shanghai. I think they were still married when they made that together. And was also in Separate Tables in the 50s. But nothing much else in her resume really popped out at me. I guess Only Angels Have Wings, or maybe The Lady from Shanghai, could be reviewed on this channel someday. But how is this woman not a bigger star, or at least not in a lot more awesome movies? She can dance, she can sing. Okay, supposedly she was dubbed by Anita Ellis when she does the show-stopping version of Put the Blame on Maine, but she was the one singing in the scene where she strums the guitar for Uncle Pio. I think so, anyway. Plus, she can deliver snappy lines. She had incredible presence, and let me say this for the 40th time today, she's one of the sexiest women I have ever seen. I discovered in my research that she apparently had an affair with Glenn Ford while making this, even though she was married to Orson Welles at this time. There you go. There's the confirmation. I forgot I wrote this down, that they were married. Maybe this didn't apply to Ford if they stayed together for a good long while after that, and I think they did. But Rita apparently once said, they fall in love with Gilda and they wake up with me, which is similar to Cary Grant's line about how everyone wants to be Cary Grant. Even I want to be Cary Grant. So I wonder if the Hayster resented the way this film impacted her image, making her even more of a sex pot than she already was. People, now I have guilt that I've said all these things about her. Well, it was in a nice way. It was a complimentary way. And I did say I love her performance, too. People she'd meet in life expected her to knock every one of their socks off, but then she went and dared to be an ordinary human being with flaws and probably imperfect hair in the morning. Even she probably didn't have perfect hair when she woke up, although if anyone would, it would have been her. As for Glenn Ford, he played Clark Kent's Earth Dad in Superman, a movie I reviewed back in June. Who is it, Superman? The world is safe again, Glenn Ford, thanks to your son. The Glenster was also the star of Blackboard Jungle, which Bev and I covered 6 or 7 years ago. And the Quebec native, I forgot that he's from Canada, from Quebec, had the role that Russell Crowe went on to do so well in the remake of 3:10 to Yuma, because Ford was the convict being escorted to the big city in the original 3:10 to Yuma. The Crowe Christian Bale one, by the way, was a pretty kick-ass Western, and it's one of the best things Russell has ever done. I was reading that some people have read gay subtext into the Johnny Ballin relationship. I often pick up on stuff like that because I try to be open-minded whenever I watch movies, and to also be in a director's wavelength, and to be open-minded in life as well. More movies have gay subtext than you think, but I didn't see that this time. This smacked far more of a devotion to a guy who gave a loser a job and a pretty good life, plus Johnny resented a woman he both loved and also hated. Was he into Ballin's balls? I just don't see it. I see it in Ben-Hur, and I see it in Red River, and I see it in so many other classics, but not this one. As for the man who played Balin, George, I think Macready, or maybe it's Macready, was the jerk-off general in Paths of Glory who ordered the firing of ordnance on his own men, and Georgie Porgy Puddin'-in-Pie was in many, many other movies and TV shows, several of them with Kirk Douglas, one of which was 7 Days in May. Solid one there, I recommend it. Joseph Calleja, or maybe it's Calleja if he is Hispanic, and maybe he is. Anyway, he was in many films in his 30-plus year career, but the biggest standout beyond this was 12 years later when he played the vital role of Pete Menzies in Orson Welles' Touch of Evil. I believe us reviewing that, as we did in 2018, constitutes the only time we've covered Marlene Dietrich. I like her, but getting back to the greatest actresses rant, she's really one of the 25 best lady stars of all time. Okay. The director of all these thespians was Charles Vidor, who worked for close to 30 years and directed about 30 films, including 3 others with Rita Hayworth. One of those was CoverGirl. And no, he was not related to the guy who directed The Crowd, King Vidor. I assumed they were brothers or cousins or something, but it says online that I made an ass out of me and me, because I assumed. No, sir, they are not relation. The writers were E.A. Ellington, Joe Isinger, and Marion Parsonet or Parsonet. Oh, and Ben Hecht was an uncredited rewriter. What did he ever do in the noir and crime genres, Ben Hecht? Well, almost everything. Benny Boy wrote the 1932 Scarface, which I reviewed back in June, and he worked with Hitchcock a lot of times, including on Notorious. He also had a hand in writing Stagecoach, Wuthering Heights, and Gone with the Wind, all in 1939. Ellington had just a story credit and only had credits on a couple other things beyond this. Isinger, one of those, had a hand in Night in the City, a film noir a few years after this, while Parsonet worked for many years and eventually did plenty of westerns, but was also one of several writers who worked on, say it with me, CoverGirl. The producer was Virginia Van Upp. Were there very many women producers working on Hollywood movies back in the 40s, especially as the only producer? You see that so much now, but in the 40s it was as hard for them to get to be the boss as it was to get directing gigs. Ida Lupino aside, she got to direct a lot of things back then. I don't know if she produced them, but if she did, I bet she wasn't the only producer. Van Upp only produced a handful of motion pictures before this and after it, but she did write a few dozen of them, including the Vidor Hayworth joint, CoverGirl. Rudolph Maté shot this black and white film. Did I say that? It's black and white. I know Rita Hayworth has red hair from what people say about it, but you can't tell because it's black and white. I think he did a pretty great job. I watched the YouTube print, though, which wasn't awesome. It was on TCM... What day was that? Sunday the 22nd, maybe? But I wanted to watch it earlier and get this done. So I'm actually recording this, I think, the day after that would have been on TCM. So I'm ahead of things. And again, fascinating, isn't it? But anyway, the point is it was on TCM. Probably looked great. The YouTube print, quite spotty. Although at least the sound was fine. If you did catch this movie on TCM that weekend, surely you'd like it even more than I did. And I was a fan, especially the way Maté lit it. It's always an attractive film, and sometimes it's fantastic. His use of shadows is great, too. Light and shadows. To put some finishing touches on this review, I would certainly recommend the movie. Hayworth was such a star, and to say she was beautiful is to undersell that word. And she's giving a hell of a performance here, too. Ford is at least solid. The film belongs to her, but he's in it more, and he carries it pretty well. As for the story, it's overstuffed and trying to do too much. Plus, it's hard to say I truly liked the ending, because these two needed to spend some time fucking, but I don't know if they should stay married. Nevertheless, the dialogue snaps, and it's always cool to see movie stars be movie stars. And that was Gilda. In 2 weeks, I'm planning to have a little less fun as I watch Tom Hanks slowly die of AIDS. He won the Oscar for Philadelphia, although I've always thought that it's Denzel Washington's movie. As for 3 days from now, Bev and I will be covering our second Todd Solondz dramedy, Happiness. His flicks are often darkly funny, and they're certainly darkly dramatic. So yes, look for Happiness on Monday. Feel like getting in touch with us? Well, we're still lurking on Twittix. My handle is @MovieFiend51 and Bev's is @BevEllisEllis. Our email is haveyoueverseenpodcast@gmail.com. Since we post all our episodes on YouTube, you can get the entire thing you just heard there. Maybe that's where you found this one. But of course, you can also click the thumbs up button, and you should, and review the show on the TubeTube. It's @HYESEllis in your browser. Subscribe and you will never, ever miss another show. Rate us there and on your podcast app. Write a review. Spread the word. Tell your friends about our movie podcast. And our sponsor would enjoy it very much if you would visit their website, sparkplug.coffee/HYES. And of course, spend some money when you visit that website. A 20% discount can be yours if you use our HYES promo code. This concludes the Gilda podcast. I love when she did that shit with her hair, and I appreciate that you spent some time hearing me talk about her hair and the rest of her. And cut. Just don't cut her hair.